Hey everyone, we are back for a special update video. And by we, of course, I mean with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going, guys? And this is a very special video. We have hit a milestone of over 1,000 subscribers. I think right now it's at 1,016 subscribers. So
Yep.
we want to definitely thank everyone who has subscribed and all of our supporters. It means a lot to us. And otherwise, this is also a special video in that we haven't had an update in a while, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's been a while for either game, and because this is a special occasion, we're just going to cover both games in this one video. And we're going to start with Damon Claw. To make a long story, hopefully a little shorter, the game evolved from an old demo I made that runs on a 30-year-old classic Amiga computers, and it was made in a basic programming language called Amos. So the birth of Damon Claw started very humbly as a kind of just proof of concept demo where I wanted to show, even in this basic programming language, if you're clever about it and careful, you can get quite a bit of layers of scrolling and cool action going on running on a classic Amiga computer. And we do know that eventually there is going to be a port of Damon Claw onto classic Amiga, but that's probably not the only classic 16-bit system that it's going to end up on. And kind of inadvertently, it just kept some of the unnecessary restrictions from its original Amos days. If you've seen our game MetroSiege, which also runs on classic Amiga computers, but will from day one also be released on modern platforms like PC, Mac, all those kind of things. So MetroSiege was made by an exceptionally good real programmer and not in a basic language, and has been, over the couple of years that MetroSiege has been developed, is incredibly powerful with far fewer limitations than that Amos demo had. So there was suddenly this realization, largely Corey's, because I was kind of in autopilot going along, getting the game working, and Corey kind of pointed out some of these things, do these limitations need to be there at this point? But it's looking very good that we can eventually get a real Mega Drive / Genesis version of Damon Claw made, which we would love to do.
Yeah, and just to chime in, like this current version of Damon Claw, even though it kind of started with the idea of it being more prototype-like,
Right.
we realized that it's come so far, the construct version, that it is its own game. It is its own version of the game,
Exactly.
worthy of putting out there and releasing. And so we thought, well, even in the retro game sense, upping the bar for this game,
Exactly.
we were following some arbitrary limitations we may not have needed to.
Yeah, definitely did not need to. And that's the thing, like, even now, because the programmer that is going to adapt the MetroSiege engine for the Damon Claw Amiga port isn't ready yet, there's all kinds of question marks for what we will be able to do and what methods will be best to get as many colors and layers of scrolling and objects on screen. Like, obviously, MetroSiege already proves that it'll be able to do a fantastic version of Damon Claw, but exactly what that's going to look like, we don't know yet. But what we can know very easily is, like, the specific graphic specs of the Mega Drive are so much more straightforward.
Right.
And so that was something, like, it's got very specific. You can have layered scrolling. We know exactly how you can divide that up. We know exactly what color palettes we can apply where. All of that is much more standard. And even the AAA developers, they did some trickery, but overwhelmingly they used those core standard methods to get those things on screen and moving on the Mega Drive. So we realized we can drastically enhance the game and raise that bar by switching over to making it look exactly how it will once we eventually get it working on the Mega Drive. And simultaneously, that also will mean we'll be able to have all that art ready for them in a format that will be very quick and easy to get in the game. So that's one of the other reasons we're going to bring this construct-made version of Damon Claw to a very polished, complete whole that we're going to release as well, is that will ensure that we can perfect the game and have all the design work done before the team porting it to Mega Drive really starts any major work. And
Exactly.
that is critically important for a development cycle. Once you have a team of people working to make a port of your game, if you're still designing stuff as you go and you might need to change stuff, that can really drag on the production time to a huge degree, which is really bad. You know, if you've done like a crowdfunding campaign to fund it, you've got a certain amount of time that the backers are willing to wait for the game, combined with a specific budget to pay the people to devote the man hours to make the game. We can take our time with this construct version, and we have been perfecting the gameplay, perfecting the input, perfecting the timing. And all too many developers, they get like a tiny bit of their game done, and then they do a crowdfunding campaign or something, and then, like I said, they've got this limited time window and this limited budget now to try to get the whole game done, and that's a massive incentive to sort of start going, that's good enough, and cutting features and just settling for what you would not have settled for if you were able to spend as much time as you really wanted to really perfect everything.
Yeah, exactly. We ensure a much higher quality version, you know, by doing it this way. Yeah, and that's we are
no compromise.
Yes, exactly.
So, but anyway, I'm going to try to show kind of side by side or one after the other just how much it's changed the visual upgrade going from the unnecessarily hindered version to full-on AAA Mega Drive. And for you Amiga people out there, don't worry. This has drastically raised the bar of what the eventual Amiga version will look like as well.
Yes, our patrons have caught a glimpse of that too, so yes.
So aside from the general graphic improvements, what we're also doing, Corey and I, basically, we've had a discussion of what other kinds of improvements that can be made, but and then in general, things like really emphasizing when you have the firepower in level 1 and you do that air bash attack that sends one of the falcons slamming down into the ground or into one of the birdmen enemies. I'm going to further increase those effects. Like if you hit one of the birdmen with a fire weapon, he already kind of goes on fire, but while he's flying back on fire, he should be trailing a little bit of fire particle effects as well. And when you slam those falcons into the ground, and they become like a flaming meteorite, basically. When they go slamming into the ground, I'm going to increase the sort of size and impact radius of the explosions they make when they hit the ground, and make sure that those hurt the enemies they hit on the ground as well. And again, if they get hit by that explosion, they'll catch on fire and they'll leave fire particles as well.
We really want you to feel the energy, you know, to feel the impact of all of these moves and have it build up as you upgrade your powers. And it's starting to really feel that way too.
All that stuff is so critical. It's one thing to get something working in a game, and it's another thing to make sure you're getting the full impact that that idea can have at its full kind of artistic fruition.
Yeah, and that ties into, you know, sound design too,
yes,
you know, so
and that is another important announcement. So we can finally officially say we have commissioned. They have just started preliminary work on it now, but we've got a fantastic and well-known video game musician working on the title song for Damon Claw, and it's really cool discussing with him our general thoughts and the general styles of music we think match, sending him builds of the game and explaining where the game's going to go and what the kind of visceral plot and visual elements of the game are and how that might influence sound design and music design. So that's all really cool. And that's another, like, it's not enough to just have good music and good sound effects. They have to really tie together beautifully with the visuals and the overall feeling of the world of the game. And we're so happy to be working with such a, not only a pro, but a passionate pro. Like, you can tell when you're having a conversation with someone that really cares. It's not just doing a pro level competent job. It's really caring about the sort of psychological impact and the flavors and the moods and the imagery that can happen. And like Corey and I have discussed this in other videos, it's amazing what happens to even like a multi-million dollar Hollywood movie, especially an action movie, when you remove the soundtrack.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it literally is comical. And it's the same thing with video games, and having such a great musician to work with. We're really excited. And that ties in too, like we realized and hopefully I've done my editing and you're seeing what the game's looking like now. We're getting really close to ready to make a big push on social media to make Damon Claw much more known out there as a retro action game that's being worked on that, hopefully will start pulling in more and more supporters and eventual fans of the game. Mm-hmm. So we're working on that, but we realized we're going to need to make the game great, but also make great teaser and trailer videos, and we can't do that with just, or we definitely don't want to do that with just, there's some great royalty-free kind of YouTube songs out there, but
right.
We really want it to have its own very unique and specific identity as far as sound goes as well. So we're really excited that that is in the works. And any of you viewers out there, if you have a YouTube or a Twitch channel and you'd be interested in having either us and Damon Claw or just Damon Claw on one of your episodes or streams, we're definitely looking for someone to basically get the world premiere. We've been hiding it under wraps for too long. We've had the entire Damon Claw level 1 boss fight, including the intro cinematic and outro, done for a long time. Now it's even more enhanced with these Mega Drive graphics, so we can't show it in this video. But we're ready to show the world, and so definitely contact us. Or if you know someone that has a popular channel that specifically, and keep in mind, right now we can't make any promises. We haven't made the deal yet with any developer for Mega Drive. So it's a retro style game that will definitely run on modern platforms, and eventually we'll for sure get it on other systems, but we can't promise when and which ones yet. So, but anyone that just in general reviews games, especially retro style action games, by all means, please contact us. We'll make sure that contact info is in the description of this video. And going back to that topic of getting ready to do a much bigger kind of social media push, that's not just as far as Damon Claw, obviously, that's in general. We already did one test live stream to sort of figure out the technical end, since I am a boomer. Our plan is fairly soon to get into a regular schedule of doing live streams that hopefully will be interesting to a lot of you, because unlike most live streams, we're not just going to be doing pixel art. We're going to be literally working on both games, and it'll be both Corey and I, and hopefully often other guests of interest, to retro game making and stuff, hanging out, talking while both Corey and I work on new stuff for either game. So very often I'll be working on MetroSiege, and Corey will be working on Damon Claw, or vice versa, and we'll be able to switch back and forth between which of our screens we'll be showing, so you can see the work in progress. You'll really get to follow the progress, but see the actual process. And usually that will be us working on pixel art and animations, but it will definitely also flow over to creative scrums. And for anyone that's never seen that side of game design before, hopefully you'll find it really interesting, which is you'll see us in real time work out and come up with specific ideas for levels, enemy behavior, game design, maybe boss fights and stuff like that. We do that exact thing for our patrons right now. Whenever we know we're going to have a big creative scrum, we record our conversation and our screens, and our patrons get to actually kind of sit in on the design progress. And then, of course, in the thread on Patreon, they can give us feedback and give us their ideas and tell us what they like or dislike about anything.
Yep. We love the idea of bringing that to the table with our live streaming. Right now that's on Twitch. Yep. Definitely go over and check out that channel.
But speaking of MetroSiege, even though he's been busier than normal, both Alex, a programmer of MetroSiege, and John have been hard at work perfecting the level 1 boss fight in MetroSiege, which once again, a boss fight that's been virtually done and ready to share with the world for many, many months now. We're finally going to be able to do it relatively soon. Both Alex and John will be able to appear together on a live stream on a fairly popular retro gaming channel, and the host will be able to play, hopefully 2-player with either Alex or John, and do a world premiere of the level 1 boss fight. We don't know the exact date yet. That's not worked out. Please do stay tuned to our channel. Here is a nice behind the scene kind of sneak peek of the kind of stuff we'll be working on. And so This is a whole roster. These are some of the new enemies that are going to appear in the new later levels of MetroSiege. These enemies up here are the basic roster of general thugs for after the inside the subway car level, which will be level 3, you get out of the subway into the more industrial warehouse district of the city, and these are the enemies. And you could see their theme. They're actually meant to look like dock workers. The boss of that level is a local, more low-level mob boss, and his dock workers, that's actually a cover, but they do smuggling and stuff like that in the warehouses and stuff. The themes are a big theme with Bitbeam Canon. If you watch some of our other videos, I'll remember to link to one in particular where I really go on a rant about that in one of our kind of Let's Play pixel art reviews of Rastan Saga 3.
I really appreciate with those guys the touch of green laces you put in their boots that helps tie in the green that you've used just a little bit in their upper parts of some of their bodies. Yeah, it's nice. Sometimes throwing in an extra value there, even if it's not that contrasting, can really add a pleasant composition to it.
Just that little extra splash of color. In color theory for art, there's the idea of complementary colors and how it's great to use them because one color really shows off the other and vice versa. However, there's this other rule that says, but if you use the complementary colors in equal part, it can quickly look bad, like kind of two halves of your image are fighting with each other too much, and it can look distasteful. So what you can do is you pick a dominant of the two colors, and then that complementary color, you put little splashes here and there for emphasis and just to like brighten up things a bit, or you know what I mean, add those splashes of contrast. So that's kind of was the instinctual mindset behind the green laces. It ties in the color of the one green guy that has the whole green vest. It balances it better, but it also just continues that little splash of green, which is why I also added it in the one guy with the sunglasses, to just give you those little splashes of green. And then you have that one character that has more of the green. It's still less than 50% of his overall character. But anyway, hopefully that was interesting. And to continue down this art thing while we're here, this character here, one of our most loyal, long-lasting, that's not the right word, one of our great patrons requested a kind of general basic thug enemy, kind of a theme for them. So I iterated a little bit with him and came up with this character who's going to be in one of the middle levels of MetroSiege. First, I designed the actual pixel art version, but then I know eventually our plan is to have physical release versions of all our games. We're not just into retro games, we're into the entire retro experience. And back in the day, you owned games. You actually bought them. You had a physical copy that you could keep, put on your shelf, lend to people. And often there was swag, at least manuals and maybe a poster in the box with the game. Before I became obsessive with pixel art and game making, I thought for sure early on in my life that I was going to be a comic book artist. But I still have that love of drawing and illustration and would love to make some comic books someday. But in the meantime, one of the beautiful kind of swag things that we're going to put in the physical versions of our game, the manuals of the game are going to look like classic late 80s, early 90s American comic book style. So they're going to be printed like comics. They're going to be full color.
When I was young and had games that had really nice manuals, I could spend hours looking at, like, reading through and looking at the manuals, and part of it was because they would make them visually interesting. They took the time to add nice illustration to them.
Hopefully I've put in footage of the recent video I made where I did the illustration of this character, and so that looks like, or might be, one of the illustrations that's going to end up in this manual. So literally every enemy is going to have a nice full body illustration, and then the players will have an even bigger full body illustration, probably also a portrait that'll give you a short biography of the character and what their strengths and weaknesses are. all that kind of fun stuff will be presented in a very classic American comic book style. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have a drawing channel, and so we're going to link to that. So that's, I actually have a painting channel too, and eventually the boxes for the physical versions of the game will actually be hand painted in classic, like, games back in the day, like the Final Fights and the Streets of Rage. Like, they had hand painted art for the cover. And so I'll be doing that sort of thing too. So all of this stuff is going to overlap, but whenever it pertains to one of our games, I'll have it up on those channels of mine, but we'll link to it and we'll post about it on our Bitbeam Canon social media as well.
Yeah, and there are a couple of Damon Claw characters drawings on there too on your drawing channel. So definitely subscribe to Mike's drawing channel.
In the case of both of those channels, I'm scripting right now the first full-on tutorial. So both channels, one is called Learn to Draw Fast, and then the other is Learn to Paint Fast. And ironically, they're all kind of time-lapse speed paintings where I do explain some technique, but there's definitely no tutorials yet. But that's something I'm going to get into when, like I said, right now I've been in major crunch time for my day job for the last several months. So that's going to end in the next month or two. So once that's over, I'll really be able to have more time to turbo boost my progress in both Damon Claw and MetroSiege, but also start to trickle out these actual tutorial videos. And also, Corey has the same plan on the Bitbeam Canon proper channel. Corey will be doing pixel art tutorials, which I really look forward to.
Yes, I have a lot of plans for that. We all already have a lot of artistic discussions on the channel, but that will get into the actual creation of, and hopefully it can help other artists or people who are interested in getting into pixel art. So
yeah, it is always great and entertaining and enlightening if you're an aspiring artist to find a bunch of artists with varying techniques and styles and watch their different techniques and mindsets and how they approach the work. And that is like, and sorry, this is going to get really artsy fartsy, everyone, but a lot of young artists worry so much way too soon about how do I establish my style? Because there's a lot of ego in a young artist that wants to prove themselves. And they don't just want to copy, which is very good, that they don't just want to copy other people's style verbatim. But the trick is there are too many young artists that want so hard to find a style that they're making decisions in large part based on ignorance. They haven't learned enough of the core critical principles of doing realistic or even exaggerated illustration, and when and why you decide to exaggerate or leave out certain things or minimalize certain things. The best way to establish your own style is to not worry about it and keep learning and take your time and find the artists that you love with a range of styles and learn from them. And you will, even without thinking about it, all the things you love most about all those artists, you're going to start to take in for your own and adapt. And your style, every artist ever, their style is an amalgamation filtered through their own brain of all the things that influence them. And the longer you just learn and put, like, you know what's the expression, nose to the grindstone, whatever you put your whatever to the grindstone. Be careful what you put to the grindstone. That can be painful and dangerous, but whatever you need to put to the grindstone, you do that. You study, you actually learn the core principles of drawing things in perspective, foreshortening, anatomy. You need to learn first, if you're going to be an actual representational illustrator, you need to learn how and why to make things look convincing and real before you can decide how you're going to change that for specific effect.
You'll know the art and the artists that really speak to you. You'll already know that just from the emotional impact. They're probably your favorite things. In the world of games, it could be your favorite games or game characters or something. But either way, the style, you'll know the things you're attracted to and want to try to mimic. But what you have to do, and this is a part of game design as well, but you have to be really critical of your favorite things. In other words, not critical necessarily negatively. You have to think critically about it. Look at each of these things and say, well, what are the things I do really like about this? What are the elements? What are the things that this artist is doing do I really love that makes them interesting? And then you have to look at the other things. Well, what are the things I wouldn't do here?
Exactly.
And then you throw those things aside, you latch on to the concepts you really appreciate. And
Exactly.
you do that with many things, and it takes time to build that.
Right.
Over time, you will find that you do have your own sense of style. It's just, it's not going to come overnight, and it's not going
Yeah.
to be easy. But that's it. It's study in that way.
Yes.
And it's actually, as an artist, that kind of stuff is really fun to take the
Right.
time to do.
Yeah.
In fact, once you're out there in the real world, so to speak, you have less time to do those things. So if you are young
Exactly.
and you do have the time, don't hesitate.
After I really got big into studying anatomy because I wanted to be able to draw really cool muscled superheroes in a very convincing way, and I really started studying anatomy, that led me to find the classics and Michelangelo and stuff like that. But then after really studying anatomy, I started looking back at some of those Michelangelo drawings and I was like, wow, for his time, he was really ahead of the grade in a lot of ways. But there were some glaring anatomical mistakes, and I'm not just talking about proportion, in some of his drawings. And I might not have known that, and that's especially true with American comics through the years, where there tend to be very muscular superheroes. If you grow up copying those other comic artists, you're inevitably also copying their shortcomings and their mistakes, and a copy of a copy of a copy always degrades. So they make a mistake and then you copy it and it becomes even more simplified and even more away from the actual anatomy. So if you never learn the anatomy, hands down, you're not going to be able to see. So that's a great thing. The real way
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
establish your style and make it like really high quality is to develop it as you're learning and to adapt to new knowledge. That way it's easier to go, I love this about this artist, but I see where they didn't study enough of this or that thing, whether it be
Exactly.
foreshortening, perspective,
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah, getting a cross section of work of your favorite artists, that helps as well, because then
Yeah.
you start to see patterns of the things that they do and you get in their head a little bit and you
Yeah.
understand what they were thinking, what they were good at, what they weren't as good at.
And there are whole videos dedicated to this kind of conversation. So if you like this
Right.
kind of stuff, take a look at our other, we have one video where we talked for quite a while about John Singer Sargent and how that correlates to pixel art to some degree and stuff like
Yep.
that. So if you like those kind of things, we make that kind of content. Sometimes we can't even help it. But anyway, to get back to MetroSiege, there's a few more screens I'm going to show you guys of the stuff we're working on. So this we've shown publicly before. So in probably the first official live stream we'll be doing, I'll actually be working on cleaning up the tile set in pixel art for this environment, which is level 4, that will have those dock workers. And then this is one of the levels right after that, which is a highway overpass. So you can see how rough it starts. And thankfully, Corey reminded me of a funny inside joke. So when we just started this project and didn't have the name MetroSiege decided yet, the working name for in-house development of MetroSiege, Alex the programmer just started calling it Roid Rage. We found that so endearing. We're going to actually make movie posters for a fake movie that never existed in this world called Roid Rage. So there's going to be classic late 80s style movie posters littered throughout the game. So there's a billboard for the movie there. That's the other crazy thing about making these games. They're not just retro. They're going to be on actual, in the case of MetroSiege, it's already running perfectly on 30-year-old Amiga computers. And we'd also love, the plan is to get that on other classic 16-bit consoles someday as well. So fingers crossed, the more support we can build. A reminder, like and subscribe and share our videos with others. If the more of a following we get, the more supporters, the more patrons, the more likely and sooner and at a higher quality all of this stuff can happen. And we really appreciate that support. But anyway, it's not just enough for us to design this in a pixel art style, like a lot of modern retro style games. I have to work very hard with Alex, the brilliant programmer for MetroSiege, and we have to use all kinds of hardware banging trickery to figure out how to get 2 big players, 4 big enemies, and several layers of scrolling and over 60 colors on screen on a classic Amiga for all of these MetroSiege levels. So it's pretty crazy. We're definitely going to dedicate a full long video or live stream someday talking with Alex and just walking through these levels. It is crazy how different and programmed from scratch with all of this trickery. Every level so far of MetroSiege is completely custom coded for the scrolling to get whatever is required for that particular level to be as great looking and impressive and have as many layers of scrolling as possible. So yeah, so anyway, so this is one of the levels which you may have seen before if you're following our progress reports, but a level I don't think the public has seen yet is one of the other later levels where you're in a park area. And this is how it starts. This is the really quick, I call it the Gumby block-in stage, where you're just working with big blobs of color, figuring out, okay, I can use sprites for these objects, and I can use tiles for these objects, and I can slice this. All those kind of weird hardware banging tricks that are specific to 16-bit and also specifically the Amiga computers. Figure out how we can break it up to get a lot of nice amount of color and layers of scrolling on screen. So you can see there'll be a far back city, there'll be much closer up background buildings, there'll be a wall, there'll be a layer of kind of hedges and shrubbery. And one thing that we're really trying to work in as much as possible, we've said this before, it's obviously very inspired by great games like Streets of Rage 2, which I'm a giant fan of, and Final Fight and games like that. But we're also going back to the source that inspired all of those, which are the Hollywood vigilante movies of the 80s and 90s. So we really want to, like you'll notice when you're playing these games, let's say Golden Axe, another Sega game, especially because it was an arcade game back in the day, they could afford to spend a little memory and spend a little sprite power and get villagers running for their lives every once in a while to remind you this is a whole world and there's innocent bystanders reacting. And that's a lot harder in a classic Amiga, much stricter memory constraints, and you can't have as many moving objects on screen as those powerful arcade systems back in the day. But as much as possible, we're working that in. So inside the subway, there's terrified passengers that are just trying to pretend they're not seeing what they're seeing to hopefully not get dragged into the carnage. So back here you could see, just using a couple of very humbly powered Amiga sprites, I'm hoping to get in an entire little scene in the far background of a policeman trying to make an arrest of some of these thugs and stuff like that. So and, you know, columns of fire where something's obviously burning off in the distance. On that topic of just making sure it feels more like there's a whole world, like I hope people that have seen more of our videos can tell Corey and I have a sense of humor, and we like to inject that sometimes, not only into the conversations and the way we edit videos, but also into the games themselves. And so sometimes it's something simple, just going back to that cinematic thing and reminding people there's a whole world. And not only do you have this automobile traffic back here in this highway overpass, but these windows are a great opportunity. So in the live streams, you might see us working on a little tiny animated, like one person might be a young guy, like in a wife beater, leaning out the window, cheering on the violence.
Right.
Yeah, in another window, you could have like a mom, clutching a baby in terror, looking out the window or something. You know what I mean? Like get that contrast of how different people might react differently, and getting those regular people, those bystanders, into the game as much as we can afford to. It adds so much, and going back to the humor thing, the reason I brought that up with is the patrons and Corey know about this, but one of the ideas I had, you make it to a certain point in this park area. Oh, the scribble's not in there yet, but in one of the levels, there will be one of those performers that pretends to be a statue. So this ridiculous gang violence is going on literally right in front of him. Probably it will have knocked over his tip cup with coins on the floor. Maybe the player will be able to carefully line up and pick up a coin for an extra point or something. But the point is, he's terrified, and now he has to keep pretending. It doesn't matter how long this battle lasts, he's not going to run away. He's going to keep pretending to be a statue in hopes that no one notices he's a real person, so he won't get dragged into the violence. So we'll probably make it so when you do an especially violent thing and the screen shakes, he'll wince, giving away the fact, like, you know what I mean? He'll like give away the fact that, haha, that's a real person. That's one of those fake statue performers. And he's just pretending for dear life to be a statue in hopes that no one notices. So that's the kind of stuff that is, and that is also something you might see in one of the vigilante movies from back in the day that was willing to interject a little humor to keep things a little lighter in the course of the movie.
Yeah, you have to have those moments of levity, I think, in those types of things. Not all of them did, but that was a big thing, back then, to always do that. So it's definitely appropriate in this game. All your ideas for those so far, and there are more that
we'll reveal those later.
I just laughed out loud every time I heard each one of them, and just hearing about them. I still haven't seen them working. They
don't exist yet, but
it's not implemented yet. But it's going to be fantastic.
So that pretty much wraps it up for this update. So we continue to make progress. Once we get into a regular schedule of live streams, that'll be great because we'll continue to grow our following and simultaneously kill two birds with one stone, which I love, with limited time in a life. We'll actually be making great progress on the games during those live streams. But once the crunch time is over, we'll really go full speed. As you saw in MetroSiege, I got a bunch of new enemies ready to animate. I even started animating some of them, which is another thing you'll see in the live streams. Also keep in mind, very soon, and we'll announce that on our social media as soon as we know the dates, but finally the public is going to be able to see the level 1 boss and more new stuff of MetroSiege that's already ready to go, and the same thing with the level 1 boss of Damon Claw, and we're super excited to finally be able to show that stuff to the public, and please do stay in touch for that. And probably there'll be like one or two other more minor update videos in the meantime where we continue to make steady progress. So please do subscribe, like, and share if you find this stuff interesting.
And comment as well. We always like getting feedback on everything we're doing, whether it's what you like or sometimes don't like about what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And it could be pertaining to potential live streams or anything. We love hearing from you guys.
That will be it for this video. Thanks so much again for watching, and we do hope you stay tuned.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.